Greetings, everyone. My name is Phoenix, and welcome to Back to Ashes. Before we go any further, please help me in wishing the April babies a very happy birthday. I very personally would like to give a great big shout out to Mama Phoenix, whose birthday was on the 6th. I love you, Mom. I'd like to also acknowledge the elite members of the channel. Thank you so much for your dedicated and continuous support. With that being said, it is time to go back to ashes, for once we arise from the ashes, we are bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Scary Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad, and after that, there will be no more ads within this video. My father only told me one real story when I was a kid. Not bedtime nonsense, not made-up fairy tales. A real story. His story. He called it the first and last thing. I never needed to hear about the woods, about blood, about the thing we can't name without giving it power. He told it like a warning, like a curse passed down from a man who'd already buried too much. It's also the story of how my grandfather died, but that's not what haunts me. You grow up hearing people talk about ghosts, aliens, cryptids, whatever your local flavor of nightmare is. You brush it off, you scoff, they're drunk, they're crazy, they're lying. But every now and then, someone says something that matches what you've heard before. Maybe in a different state, maybe by someone who doesn't know your story at all. And then the world gets just a little too big, a little too dark. That's when I started to believe in the rake. Of course, my father never called it that. He wasn't the type to surf the internet or fall down rabbit holes. He didn't know what the forums called it. To him, it was just it. Or when he dared to speak its name aloud, he used the word his grandfather had whispered only once. Skinwalker. Let me tell it the way he told me. We lived on a dairy farm in Ohio, back in the days when money came hard and went easy. We used to hunt coyotes for cash, $50 a skin. We'll sell them to this guy who didn't ask questions. It was mostly nighttime work, moonlit fields, frost on the grass, and silence broken only by the far-off wails of something dying slow. Sometimes, when luck struck, we'd come across a deer, fresh and stupid, meat for days. One night, we were cutting through the woods on foot, not four-wheeler, no truck, just us and the guns. That's when we smelled the blood. Thick, metallic, suffocating. The kind of smell that clings to your throat like smoke. It was everywhere. Tree trunks were painted in it. The grass was matted with it. The creek ran red. At first, we thought it was a coyote kill, maybe a pack going wild. But when we saw the carcasses, what was left of them, we knew better. 3 deer torn to shreds, not eaten, not hunted, just obliterated. Limbs flung like trash, heads gnawed off but left uneaten, skin peeled in strips. It wasn't about survival, it was about cruelty. Something enjoyed this. My father told me to head home. I refused. I was 13 and stupid and scared of the dark, and I wouldn't walk those woods alone with a .22 and a pocket knife. He eventually gave in. We followed the blood. We should have stopped when we heard the screaming. Every animal in the woods losing its mind. Birds flew straight into trees. Rabbits, deer, coyotes, all running in the same direction. Away. Not even looking at us, just fleeing. That's when I saw fear in my father's eyes. We tracked it to an old, rotted schoolhouse, half collapsed from a tornado years back. Sometimes addicts squatted in there. But this night, it was different. The place throbbed with something wrong. And then we heard it. A sound, wet, tearing animal, but also intelligent. It was layered, a high shriek and a deep rumble, like someone tearing paper while swinging a bucket of water. My father motioned for distance. He whispered that it was probably a rabid dog. He was lying. I think he already knew. We crept closer. I remember the moonlight making everything silver and unreal. And then we saw it. It was crouched over a carcass, something unrecognizable, ripping and flinging pieces it didn't want. Its skin was corpse white, stretched too tight over bones. It was man-shaped, but not human. Its arms were too long, its back too hunched. Its fingers were long and clawed, twitching like insect legs. And it was smiling, not with its mouth, but its whole face, like it knew we were watching. My dad hesitated. He wasn't about to shoot a person, not even one that looked like that. So he cleared his throat. Everything went still. The woods went dead silent in a way I've never heard again. It turned slowly, like it was amused. Then it screamed and leapt. The thing landed on him with a sound like a tree snapping. My father got one shot off. It didn't matter. I emptied 5 rounds into it from point blank. Nothing. I smashed it with the butt of my rifle, screaming myself hoarse. But it didn't even flinch. It peeled my father apart like a butcher going to work. I'll spare you the details, but it was surgical, deliberate, like it wanted him aware. It started with the throat, then the face, then it scooped into its chest like it was looking for something. I still hear the wet crack of the ribs splitting open. I blacked out. When I came to, I was running my father's body half draped across my back, or what was left of him, just the torso and part of his head. I could hear it behind me, crashing through the forest, screaming like it was laughing. I made it to my landlord's house. He and his buddies were drunk around the fire. When he asked what was on my back, I looked down and saw the shirt. My dad's flannel, soaked and shredded. That's when it screamed again, loud enough to shake the windows. The landlord pulled me inside. Guns came out. The thing circled the house. We saw it pass the fire. It smiled again. Something hit the window. It was the body of the landlord's dog, just the torso. Then came the garage, the sound of metal being torn apart, glass shattering. We barricaded the doors, and then silence, but not peace. The kind of silence that feels like holding your breath too long. Then something shattered upstairs. It was inside. We rushed the door to the second floor. Just as we reached it, it did too. We slammed into it. It pushed back, wood groaned. Then someone blew its hand off with a shotgun. It only made it scream louder. Eventually, it stopped pushing. When the cops came, they found nothing. No body, no tracks, just blood and ruin. The story was buried. Officially, a rabid bear. Unofficially, everyone forgot, forced themselves to, except me. Years later, when I enlisted, The landlord gave me a drink and finally told me the truth. The severed hand? The cops said it was a bear paw, but the officer who took it died in a car crash that night. The hand? Gone. When I came back from deployment, the landlord had vanished. Missing. They say he owed money, but I knew better. Then my mom died, and my father. He didn't last long after. One night, he just went back into those woods. No gun, no flashlight, no goodbye. They never found him. That should have been the end of the story. But last year, something strange happened. I got a letter, no return address. Inside was a photo. Grainy, black and white. Looked like a trail cam image. It showed my father, older, hollow-eyed, mouth stitched shut, kneeling. Behind him, the thing stood tall, fingers hooked into his shoulders like a puppet. On the back of the photo, scratched in what looked like blood, were 3 words. He never left. I was 23, alone in the deep woods of the Ozarks, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. The forest was thick, ancient, breathing around me. I had just gotten my hands on a set of gear I'd saved for months. Tactical boots, a vest I modded myself, and even a mil-spec gas mask I scored secondhand from a guy who used to do government contract work out in Utah. It smelled faintly of sweat and chemicals. Perfect. I had my old nugget rifle with me. Not much use against a black bear, but enough to ruin the day of a rabid dog or a too curious cougar. My clipazines, 2 of them, home-built, experimental, were snug in their loops. Rolled up targets tucked behind me. Survival gear, locked and loaded. Compass, topo map, mylar blanket, extra socks, MREs, canteen, camelback. I wasn't just ready. I was prepared for war. It was supposed to be a solo weekend of testing gear and playing soldier. The kind of thing my dad would have rolled his eyes at, but it made me feel alive. That feeling didn't last. I was scrambling through a dry creek bed when it hit me. First like a whisper, then like a wave. A smell. Not animal musk, not rot, not anything I could name. It was sour and damp, sharp like onion sludge, but with something deeper, almost metallic, like old pennies left in blood. It stung behind the eyes. I gagged hard, nearly throwing up the Adderall I had just popped. Everything was moving around the ridge. Clumsy, heavy, wrong, snuffling, grunting, wet footsteps dragging through leaves like meat slapping wet tile. I instantly flipped. I dropped to one knee and slipped the mask over my face. It helped a little, but the smell still clawed its way in. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was up there wasn't just big. It was looking for something. I chambered around and crept up the opposite bank, using the rocks as cover. My breath came fast, too fast, not from exertion, but from something older than fear, something primal, like a whisper in my blood telling me not to look. But I looked anyway. It wasn't a bear. It looked like one. In that way, mannequins look like people. Wrong proportions. wrong eyes, limbs just slightly too long, too bowed, fur black and brown, slick with rot, knotted with clumps of what I had hoped was just mud. Its front limbs were bent weird. What I thought were shoulders were elbows. It could have touched its toes without leaning forward, but it was close, way closer than it should have been. Then I farted. Loud, wet, final. The thing stopped moving. Its head tilted slowly. Its nostrils flared. It stood. Not reared up. Stood. On two legs. Its spine popped into place like it hadn't done it in a while. Towering. Thick. Crooked. Its face was stretched. Snout-like, but with human-like lips drawn thin and trembling, as if trying to form a word. It sniffed the air, and then it spoke. One gargling, glottal bark that shook the trees. Gorp. My blood ran cold. I fired. Center mass. The bullet thudded into its shoulder, but did nothing but fluff the matted hair. No blood, no sound of pain, just a slow, curious tilt of head. I fired again. It struck its face this time and bounced off. The thing twitched, not from pain, from interest. It smiled. I ran, or tried to. My knees didn't want to obey. It watched me scramble up the hill like I was part of the show. I swear it could have caught me, easily, but it didn't. It let me go. When I got back to my dad's house, I told him everything. He locked every door and window without a word and didn't come downstairs for the rest of the day. Just sat up there in his old recliner with a shotgun across his lap. He said the word gorp only once. Quiet, like a prayer or a curse. I asked him about the folder, the old photos he kept of the supposed big bears. He didn't show me this time. Just told me that if I saw it once, it'll come again. He was right. I didn't see it again for a long time. Years. I moved, lived in a city, got married, had a kid. Then my daughter came home from daycare with a drawing. Crayon. Crude. A big black lump with arms and a face. Yellow eyes. Big mouth. She wrote one word next to it in shaky handwriting. Gorp. That night, she spoke in her sleep, a deep, wet voice, not hers, rising from her tiny throat. You smelled me. Now I smell you. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did my wife. We just sat in the hall, staring at her door, shotgun across my knees. But by morning, we both forgot. Not forgot like dismissing a dream. Forgot like something reached in and scooped it out. I only remembered when I saw that crayon drawing weeks later, stuffed in a kitchen drawer. And when I did, I realized something else. I never told her about the woods, or the name, or what happened. So how the hell did she know? And why, in that same drawer, was there a second drawing? One I don't remember her making, of me standing in the forest, with something smiling behind me. The Babysitter's Game, by me, the one who should have said no. I used to think evil wore a mask, that you could just spot it in someone's eyes, or at least in the way they talked. But I was wrong. Evil hides in laughter. It hides in luxury. And sometimes it asks you to babysit for a sweet little girl in East Hampton. I was 17, naive, eager. A friend of my mom's offered me a babysitting gig. Good money, light work, sweet kid. That's how it started. The parents were perfect, rich, warm, generous in a way that felt excessive, as if they were paying not just for time, but for silence. Still, I couldn't say no. By the fifth time I sat for them, their daughter, Angie, and I had a routine. We'd eat pizza, play dress up, watch old movies on VHS. I never questioned the pristine, eerily quiet home. Never wondered why the fridge was always perfectly stocked with the exact snacks I liked, or why Angie never asked questions about her school, her friends, her life outside the gates. It was October 16th, 1992, when everything cracked open. It started with a phone call. Angie picked it up, her tiny voice chirping out a greeting too rehearsed for a 9-year-old. She frowned. "No one's there," she said. The second call came 10 minutes later. Silence again. And I don't mean the awkward kind. I mean breathing, wet, guttural, like someone exhaling right against your ear. Then a click, like they wanted me to know they'd hung up. I lied to Angie, told her it was the wrong number. But I had this sick knot in my stomach, this creeping dread that curled around my spine. I decided it was the boy who'd been stalking me at school. But that would have been too simple, too human, too unexplainable. At around 9:30, I saw headlights in the driveway. A black car. No movement, no buzzer from the gate. Then, 4 men climbing the gate like it was nothing and started towards the house. Still calm, I picked up the phone to dial 911. No dial tone. That's when I understood. The line hadn't died. It had been cut. I told Angie to go upstairs. My voice cracked. I told her there were bad men coming and we had to hide. I expected her to cry, to panic. But instead, she took my hand and led me, not just to a closet, but behind it. She moved a book on a shelf. A click. Hinges groaned, and behind the shelf, a staircase. A hidden panic room. Angie didn't hesitate. She'd known it was there the entire time, and she knew how to use it. The room was surreal. A sitting area. Snacks, a small TV. Then the next room. A control center. Monitors on the wall. Audio feeds. A phone with a dial tone. When I heard the tone, I almost collapsed. I called the police. Tell them we were being broken into. Tell them a little girl's life was in danger. But Angie? She was watching Scooby-Doo on the couch, munching a granola bar, completely calm. I asked her if this had happened before. She said, "No, but Mommy and Daddy told me what to do if they ever came back." They? Not if someone breaks in, not in case of burglars. No, they. I watched the monitors. The men weren't stealing. They weren't ransacking. They were searching. Room to room, peeking under beds, whispering to each other. "She has to be here. I heard her voice. We don't leave without the girl." They weren't here for money. They were here for Angie. When the sirens came, the men ran. The cops caught the driver. He claimed he didn't know anything. The others disappeared like smoke. And just like that, it was over. Angie's parents were called, and they came rushing home, acting like their world had just been flipped upside down. But here's what kept me up at night. Angie wasn't scared, not once. She didn't ask if her parents were okay. She didn't cry. She knew how to open the safe room. She knew how to switch on the monitors. She knew how to survive. Weeks passed. I told myself I wasn't imagining it. The way she barely blinked as masked men hunted us. How she never even asked why they wanted her. Then, one day, I got a letter in the mail, a thank you card from Angie. It was sweet. Crayon drawings of us eating pizza and watching cartoons. But at the bottom, in neat handwriting that didn't look like a child's, were 6 words. Next time, let them take me. The church in the hollow. They say the devil doesn't walk through the front door. He waits for you to invite him in. I was raised Southern Baptist, God-fearing, hymn-singing, full submersion Baptist before I could spell salvation. Faith was my anchor, my armor. Even when life got messy, God was constant. At least, that's what I believed. I'm in my early 40s now. Work part-time overnight, security on the weekends. Nothing dramatic. Long hours, quiet nights. Mostly empty buildings humming under fluorescent lights. I actually used to thank God for the boredom, but that was before everything happened. It was a Sunday, 4 weeks ago now. Though it feels like years. Around 5 a.m., I got a call. It was Todd. He takes over my shift at 7. "Hey, man," he said, voice static and strained. "Car trouble. Gonna be a few hours late." I clenched my jaw. That meant no shower, no fresh clothes, no morning service. I told him, fine, just get here. I'd catch the evening service instead. No big deal. Funny how small decisions spiral into damnation. By the time I left, I was exhausted. Eyes dry, bones sore. About 4 miles from work, on a winding stretch of road I've driven 1,000 times, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A crooked wooden sign, hand-painted. Christ Community Church, 6 miles to the right. I slowed down. I never noticed it before, but maybe I just never looked. The arrow pointed down a narrow, tree-choked road I'd always avoided. Church is church, I told myself. I turned. The road narrowed more than I expected, weaving through dense woods that swallowed sunlight. I started to get this pressure in my chest, like something old and heavy was watching me from between the trees. Still, I kept going. That's when I saw it. A small white church. Perfect. Untouched. Not a single board out of place. Like it had been preserved in a jar and only just now unsealed. Behind it, a graveyard. The headstones were crooked, pitted, names lost to time. No birds, no wind, just silence so thick it rang in my ears. The parking lot was empty, but when I stepped inside, the pews were full, and every head turned at once. Not startled, not curious, just synchronized, like they'd been waiting, like I was late. Their faces were wrong, too smooth, their eyes too still. The men wore dark suits, shoes polished to a mirror sheen. The women were draped in lace, hats like blooming funeral flowers. Even the children looked out of time, frozen in an era. I felt grubby in my work uniform, like I'd tracked filth into a mausoleum. I almost turned and left, but I didn't. The service began. The singing. It was beautiful, impossibly so. Their voices weaved together like a single organism. Not one sour note, not one misstep. Like they were rehearsing something for a performance no living person was meant to see. When it ended, no one moved, not even to blink. A tall man emerged from the pulpit, thin as a rail, skin like old parchment stretched too tight. His eyes were bottomless, and his smile, God help me, his smile was the worst part. It was too warm, like a wolf pretending to be your grandfather. "Welcome, brother," he said, in a voice like honey curdling in the jar. "I'm Pastor Paul. We're so pleased you found us." I shook his hand. It was dry and cold, like paper over bone. "We have a business meeting," he said, still smiling. "But we'd love to see you again next Sunday." It wasn't a suggestion. I nodded, left, didn't even start my car until I prayed. The second Sunday, I didn't plan to go back. I swear on everything that I didn't. But when I got in my car that morning, my GPS glitched, froze, rebooted, and when it came back online, the route was already programmed. Same twisted road, same church. I don't remember turning the wheel. When I arrived, it was deja vu. Empty lot, full pews, same congregation, same synchronized turn of heads when I walked in. But this time, they smiled. A woman in white gloves touched my shoulder. "It's so good to see you again." A boy with a bow tie grinned up at me. "You're almost one of us now." They sang the same hymns, in the same order, in the same perfection. After the service, Pastor Paul took my hand again, his smile wider, teeth too many. "I knew you'd return," he said. I left, drove home with shaking hands, locked my doors, didn't sleep. Still, I went back the third Sunday and the fourth because I couldn't not. Then Pastor Gary called. He's the pastor at my real church, the one with potlucks and parking lot pavement. He asked if I was okay, said he hadn't seen me in weeks. I told him about the new place, Christ Community, just trying something different until my work schedule shifted back. The silence on the other end was long, too long. "Christ Community?" he said finally. I said, "Yeah." I think there's been a mistake," he said, voice tight. "That church, it collapsed. Earthquake. Over 100 years ago. Buried the whole conversation alive. It was on the news back when I was a kid. They said they could still hear voices coming from the rubble for days, but no one ever got out." I laughed, told him they must have rebuilt. "Don't go back there," he said suddenly. "Please." I didn't listen. But this time, when I went back, the church was gone. No sign, no road, no clearing. Just a field, fenced off. Trees I'd never seen before. But I know it was here. My tires left tracks. My boots had touched that soil. And then I saw it. A gravestone. New, polished, my name on it. My date of birth carved deep. No date of death. Not yet. I ran, drove home without blinking. That was last Sunday. This morning, I found something under my pillow. Not a note, not a knife. A single blackened lace glove, stiff with dried blood, and inside it, a withered finger bone. Wrapped around it, a tiny ribbon, the color of spoiled milk, tied in a bow. Just another ride. 6 years ago, when I was 27, I worked at a bar that stayed open far later than it should have. The kind of place where the drinks were cheap, the regulars were haunted, and the walls absorbed more secrets than sound. By the time I clocked out, it was nearly 3 a.m., the hour when the city finally exhales, when the streets were drained of life and what's left behind slithers between shadows. My apartment was only a 10-minute walk, and most nights I welcomed the silence. It was a strange kind of peace after hours of clinking glasses, shouted orders, and bad pickup lines. But that night, something was different. There were 2 ways home. The first followed the main strip, still lit, still alive with drunken laughter and stiletto stumbles. I don't have it in me to dodge groping hands or mutter no thanks to strangers, slurring affection like curses. So I took the quieter route home, the darker one. The streetlights were scattered like dying stars, and most of the buildings stood shuttered and dark, like abandoned teeth and a rotting smile. I told myself I was fine. I'd walked this way before. But as I moved, the quiet changed. It didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like something unseen was watching and waiting. I was halfway home when I heard them. 4 men, maybe more. Loud, drunk, the kind of laughter that carried venom. Their shapes staggered closer, cutting through the stillness. I veered to the side, tried to make myself small, but one of them moved to intercept. "Hey, sweetheart, where are you headed?" I ignored them, eyes down, pace steady, but they circled like sharks, feeding off each other's laughter. "Come on, don't be rude. We're just being friendly." My skin prickled. I felt their heat, smelled their breath. One reached for my arm. "I'm not interested," I said, voice like ice. They lingered. I could feel their gazes scraping across me like knives. Then one of them snorted and said, "Huh, fucking cow." They finally moved on. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe until their voices were swallowed by the dark. That's when I heard it. The slow, deliberate hums of tires crawling behind me. A cab had pulled up beside me. Its headlights were dull, the paint chipped and dirty. The window rolled down with a mechanical wheeze. "You all right, love?" the driver asked. "I saw what happened back there. You need a ride?" He looked like someone's grandfather, late 50s, kind face, crow's feet. He even smiled like he was trying to put me at ease, which should have been my first red flag. "I won't charge you," he added. "Just want to make sure you get home safe." Every cell in my body screamed no. I felt it, deep in my stomach, like the first drop on the roller coaster. But I was tired, rattled, and the thought of walking even one more block made my knees tremble. So I got in. The cab reeked of stale cigarettes and cheap air freshener. He asked for my address in that same gentle voice, like this was all routine. I gave it to him. He started driving, and for a moment, I felt ridiculous for being so suspicious. And then he missed my street. Uh, that, that was my turn, I said. I know, he replied quickly, just finding a place to turn around. But he didn't look for a turn. We kept going, past convenience stores, past neighborhoods, past streetlights, into a part of the city that was forgotten. Industrial husks, rusted out warehouses, and empty lights that smelled like rot and ruin. Stop the car, I said, my voice sharp. No answer. His hands never left the wheel. When he finally slowed, it wasn't to turn around. He had reached a dead end. No streetlights, no people, just tall weeds and buildings with boarded eyes. I felt it then, the kind of dread that doesn't come from fear, but from understanding. I wasn't going home. This is perfect, I said, forcing my voice to stay level. You can turn around here. He didn't speak, just looked at me through the rearview mirror. And that's when I saw his face change. His smile disappeared. His eyes were flat now, cold and hungry. He stared at me like I was something already dead. But then, something shifted. I don't know if it was my expression or the tremble in my voice, but he blinked. His grip loosened on the wheel. You're right, he muttered. This'll do. He turned the car around. When we neared my street, I told him to stop a block away. I didn't want him to know where I lived. I barely waited for the cab to stop before I bolted. My legs were jelly. My heart was a thunder drum. I locked every window, every door, sat on the floor with my back against the door, shaking. I never told anyone. I didn't want the looks, the "why did you get in the car?" questions. I told myself I got lucky. That he changed his mind. I believed that for a while. But a few weeks later, I saw something on the news. A woman around my age had gone missing a few towns over. Last seen getting into a cab that matched the same description, same model, same chipped yellow paint. They found her weeks later in an abandoned warehouse. Or rather, pieces of her. They never caught who did it. But here's the part I've never said out loud. Sometimes when I walk home late at night, I still hear the hum of tires behind me. And once, just once, I saw a cab idling at the end of my street. Same dull headlights, same broken antenna. Only this time, the driver didn't smile. He waved, like he remembered me, like he was waiting for the next time I chose the quiet road. Do not watch this feed. I first became interested in the dark web during my second year at university. It started as nothing more than a curious itch during a cybersecurity seminar. Our professor mentioned it in passing, and the phrase lingered in my head like a half-forgotten dream. The way people talked about it, you'd think it was a modern myth, whispers of digital phantoms, forbidden knowledge, and horrors hidden behind encrypted walls. Naturally, I was intrigued. At first, I told myself my interest was just academic, technical, clinical. I wanted to understand the architecture of this hidden realm, the anonymizing protocols, the implications for the future of privacy. But that was a lie. Deep down, there was something else driving me, something darker, a need to see what wasn't meant to be seen. Accessing it was disappointingly easy. A few downloads, Tor, a reliable VPN, a burner wallet, and I was in. But navigating it, that was different. It didn't feel like the internet. It felt like stepping into a cold, flooded basement where each click could submerge you deeper. Everything was unindexed, fragmented, untraceable. I started slow. I found forums on encryption, whistleblowing, secure communications, places where journalists and descendants gathered. The part was noble, even inspiring. But the deeper I went, the more I saw the rot. Forums filled with frantic users claiming they were victims of gang stalking. People insisting they were under constant surveillance, that their lives were being orchestrated by shadowy figures. Their posts were delusional, erratic, heartbreaking. But among the madness sometimes there were things that felt too specific. Like someone was documenting something real, horribly real, and hiding it in plain sight, dressed up as lunacy. But it wasn't until I stumbled into a thread titled, "Do not watch this feed," that everything changed. It was buried deep, 4 directories deep, past forums with names like Veil Talk, Meat Spires, and the Orphan Protocol. The thread had no replies, just a single user, no underscore flesh, who had joined that very day. The post was simple. Don't look. If you look, you'll never stop seeing it. Link below. 1 BTC to enter. That should have been it. That should have been where I clicked back, shut my laptop, and forgot all about it. But there was something about that phrasing. Not a dare, not a boast, a warning. A real one. I stared at that post for at least an hour before sending the payment. The link opened a black screen. Just a blinking countdown. 14 minutes, 37 seconds. I remember the feeling in my chest like something was watching me. Like the camera on my laptop had turned on, even though I'd disabled it days before. When the timer hit 0, the screen stuttered, and then the feed began. It was grainy, like old security footage, but sharp enough to see the details that mattered. The room was sterile and colorless, walls tiled like a morgue. A man in a white coat stood in the center behind a table. Something moved on the table. Someone. Strapped down, muffled screaming. A woman, her eyes locked on the camera, like she knew I was there. The chat beside the feed was already alive. Anonymous users typing in rapid bursts. Start with the teeth. She's conscious. Great. Make her sing again. Offer the mirror. I should have closed it. God help me. I should have. But I couldn't. It was like watching a train derail in slow motion. The man in the coat, he didn't speak, didn't even acknowledge the chat. He simply began. The procedures were methodical, clinical, injections, blades, mirrors placed above her head, forcing her to watch herself as he worked. She screamed so hard, she began to choke. I think part of her throat collapsed. I remember noticing that. I don't know how long it went on. Hours, maybe. The audience cheered, typed, jeered. But the strangest thing was how familiar some of their usernames looked. Not just random strings, but names I recognized. A mod from the privacy forum, a journalist I followed. One was the handle of someone from my class. When the session ended, the screen went black and a message appeared. Thank you for watching. You will be contacted shortly. I slammed the laptop shut, ripped the battery out. I couldn't breathe. I vomited into the sink. I cried. I scrubbed my hard drive, deleted everything. Wallet, tour, logs, all of it. I told myself it had to be fake. A sick performance. A snuff simulation. Right? Except the email started 3 days later. First, just blank subject lines. Then photos. Screenshots from the stream. My face reflected in the black mirror of the laptop screen. My apartment. The street I lived on. My parents' house. And then the packages began to arrive. Inside each box, an item taken from my apartment that I hadn't noticed was missing. A fork, a sock, my spare keys. The final box contained a mirror. On the glass, scrawled in something dark and flaking, was a message. Now it's your turn. Don't worry, someone's already paid. It started on Wednesday. I remember the precise time because I've always been a creature of habit. 6:15 a.m. Alarm blaring, coffee brewing, the smell of stale city air leaking in through a cracked kitchen window. My life, up until that morning, was predictable. I had a good job at a large market research firm in Midtown Manhattan. 6 years in, I was comfortable, respected, safe, or so I thought. The lot behind my apartment building was nearly empty when I stepped outside. The winter air sharp against my skin. My car stood alone under the dim glow of a flickering overhead lamp. And then I saw him. Leaning against the wall near the hood of my car was a man, early 20s, ball cap, hoodie, still as a corpse, watching me. No cigarettes, no earbuds, just standing there, staring. I slowed my steps. Can I help you? I asked, careful not to sound confrontational, but I kept my distance. He grinned, wide, too wide. Can nobody help you, homie? It was such a weird offbeat response that I almost laughed. Almost. But something about the way he said it felt off, like a line rehearsed 1,000 times in front of a mirror. I got in my car and drove off, shaking it off. That was the last time I'd feel normal for a very long time. By the time I returned from work, I'd almost forgotten the morning encounter, distracted by traffic, deadlines, and one of my boss's infamous midweek tantrums. I pulled into my spot and noticed no broken glass, no signs of forced entry. A silent relief. Until I turned the corner to my apartment and was hit by a stench so foul I gagged. My front door was painted in diarrhea. Not just smeared, but blasted like some obscene biological graffiti. The force of it had splattered across the walls and floor. I stood frozen, my breath caught somewhere between disbelief and bile. I called emergency cleaners and building management to pull the security footage. Then I locked myself in, triple checking the deadbolt. That night, I watched the footage alone in the dark, drinking burnt coffee with shaking hands. What I saw chilled me more than the act itself. A man in a fluorescent vest approached the entrance that afternoon, hood up, cap low. At first, I thought he was a delivery guy, until he reached my door, dropped the package, then his pants, and exploded his bowels all over my threshold. He didn't wipe, didn't even look around. He just pulled his pants up and walked off like he dropped off mail. It wasn't the guy from the parking lot, but it felt connected, like a coordinated act in a play I didn't know I'd been cast in. The next morning, my car was trashed, windows smashed, tires slashed, the interior slathered in some sticky industrial grease. I called the police again. Their interest was casual at best. When I suggested the two incidents might be connected, they laughed. That was the last time I laughed for weeks. I moved into a hotel that evening, called my father, tried to keep the fear out of my voice, but he heard it anyway. "They knew where you lived," he said quietly. "That's not random." He was right. Because when I returned to my apartment to gather essentials, I found the door hanging off its hinges. Inside looked like a war zone. Every glass surface was shattered. My bed was split down the middle like something had been searching inside it. My laptop had been stomped to splinters. My fish tank shattered. My fish, lifeless, still gasping in shallow puddles of water. That broke something in me. They didn't just want to scare me. They wanted to erase me. It kept escalating. I was assaulted in broad daylight near Grand Central, punched in the face by a stranger who called me by my name and screamed, "You suck, dude," before vanishing into the crowd. Then came the call. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a private number. I answered, hoping it was the police following up. The voice was deep, calm, confident. "Is this redacted?" he asked. Yes, who is this?" "They call me Odin," he said. "We need to talk." He told me my identity, real name, employer, old address, had been posted on a hidden site on the dark web, a place called Docspin. There, alongside my photo and job history, were fabricated allegations of child abuse. Horrific stuff. "It's why this is happening to you," he said, "while they're after you." I couldn't breathe. Odin claimed he could trace the post's origin, said he already had. He suspected a disgruntled former coworker, one I'd reviewed and helped terminate months earlier, a tech-savvy recluse with a penchant for revenge. I believed him until he asked for money. He wanted payment in Bitcoin to remove the post permanently. He said it would buy me peace. I hesitated. He said he'd take it down first as a gesture of goodwill, and he did. 10 days passed. No attacks, no vandalism, no threats. I caved. I sent the payment. And then he vanished. I never heard from Odin again. But I had questions, so I called the ex-coworker, pretending to check in on him. Casual, friendly. He seemed surprised, nervous, not scared, just calculating. Then, at the very end of the call, I said it. "I know what you did." There was silence. No denial, no confusion, just a long pause. And then the click of disconnection. That was confirmation enough. I left New York, moved across the country, changed jobs, changed everything. I thought it was over. But last week, I got a package. No return address, no note, just a burned flash drive in a black envelope, sealed with wax. It smelled like old metal and formaldehyde. I plugged it into a throwaway laptop. Inside was a single video file, security footage. It was me, standing in my hotel room, sleeping, alone. Then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the footage glitched, and a figure stepped into frame. Odin. Or at least something wearing Odin's voice. He stood over me for 6 full minutes, and then leaned down, mouth close to my ear, and whispered, "Can't nobody help you, homie." The screen went black. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true scary stories. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the rest of the members of Back to Ashes and to the new listeners. Thank you all so much for your continued support. I say it every time. If it weren't for you, I would not have a voice, and Back to Ashes would not exist. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.